Hi, welcome. This is Steve Gillmor, and this is a special edition live version of the Gillmor Gang. Those of you who are watching this on TechCrunch or on Building 43, I'm going to try and lead us through. We're at the incredible Dreamforce conference. Salesforce has gone over the 30,000 mark in terms of attendees, and it's really extraordinary. We're sitting in front of the expo where partners and attendees intermingle. Today's gang, we're joined by a familiar gang member, John Taschek of Salesforce.
Great
Welcome,
to be part
John.
of the gang. Yeah, excellent.
And also noted analyst Phil Wainewright. Phil is, for those of you, he also happens to have a little blog over there on ZDNet, right, Phil?
Well, I'm a great fan of the Gillmor Gang, so it's great to be on here today.
Well, it's great to have you. And someone who's also been on the Gillmor Gang in the past, and who is now newly joined as Chief Scientist at Salesforce, JP Rangaswami. Welcome, JP.
Yeah, I'm really glad to be here as well, although I'm going to learn something about how to project my ears more than my mouth.
Yes, well, after last night's concert, I noticed you were a couple of victims over. Our ears are pretty well obliterated, I think, after Will.i.am.
But what a concert it was. Yeah.
That was incredible. For those of us who remember the 60s, right? And our special guest here, of course, is Victoria Barret, who is, are you a senior editor or writer?
I'm an associate editor at Forbes.
At Forbes, and you've been, I think the term is embedded.
With the troops?
Yes, with the troops, particularly with the main general of this effort, Mark Benioff. You've been covering him, and you wrote what I thought was a terrific cover story.
Oh, thanks.
About Mark and about Salesforce and new leadership. So let's get right to it. What do you see? I think you imply, and in some cases state overtly, the impact of what appears to be a new kind of leader in Mark Benioff.
Well, I've known Mark for a long time. I wrote one of the first big business feature stories on Mark in 2001. And, you know, in many ways, Mark hasn't changed very much. What has changed is the industry around him, and of course Salesforce, the size of the company. And everyone sort of caught up to him. I mean, in 2001, he was, you know, it's hard to describe Mark as little, but this little pipsqueak that was making a lot of noise, and everyone else in the industry was sort of trying to whack him down, and he wouldn't stop.
Well, they're still trying to whack him, but...
They are. It's harder now.
Yes.
He has more security people now.
Oh, I see.
But, you know, now his message is one that is widely accepted and frankly has been copied by the rest of the industry, in my opinion. But one of the things that I really like about Mark is, you know, he's still fighting harder than ever, and I think right now has in many ways found a sweet spot, and this was largely what my story was about in Chatter. I mean, it is really like the perfect product for him to be pitching, because Mark is a wonderful communicator, and he's found himself, I think, in a product that is all about communication and really wants to transform how people communicate inside companies.
Phil Wainewright, what's your take coming from the blocking and tackling analyst space? What's your take on Chatter?
My take on Chatter is that I think that what we're seeing in a lot of the SaaS applications is that instead of automating the interactions between machines, it's becoming more about automating how people interact with each other. So bringing Chatter into Salesforce, to me, has always been about greasing the wheels of how people interact with each other. I think it's a great application within sales teams, because they've got this need, and particularly the more mobile sales is getting, the more there is this need to have real-time communication going on and having these information streams that people can tap into. But one thing that I think we always wanted to do was to see that go out into other parts of the business as well and bring other people into that conversation. And one of the things I said when I first saw Chatter come out was that there needs to be a free version. So I'm really pleased to see that there is now a free version.
It's called the Wainewright version, I believe.
Oh, well, that's very kind. I think, yes. Good of you to name it after me. Thanks, John.
JP, you, of course, predicted all of this in 2003 and 4, right?
Yeah, I think that what I love in what I'm seeing today is not a sense of pride about what I predicted, because I was only seeing bits of it. I was influenced more by a net vibes type world at the time I was talking about it. And what I've realized since, and I've worked through as I've written about Facebook or Twitter, and what I now see live in Chatter, is that the distinctions between human beings, documents or events and systems is a foolish distinction when you're trying to figure out what publish subscribe should be in the enterprise. And the first group of people who've really cracked that everything and every person is a node on a publish subscribe mechanism is Chatter. And that's that was the aha moment as I worked with the guys saying a document has a right to speak in the same way as a human being, and I can subscribe. So the second element of the pain of spam, which is sort of sender-driven behavior, when power is in the receiver, or the beneficiary, right? It's a huge change. So, for years I've been considering why work is lumpy, and we spend a lot of time.
Work is what?
Lumpy. Work is amorphous. It doesn't come in even, cars on an assembly line that we got to work with. Knowledge work is intrinsically lumpy. And we spend time...
Especially when I'm late with my deadline. It gets really, really lumpy when I got a deadline to meet.
Right. But it's true for any knowledge worker, but we haven't really had tools that allow you to work with the lumpiness. In fact, we do the opposite. The tools spend a lot of time trying to pretend to smooth out what is intrinsically lumpy.
Well, one of the things that I think that we're discovering from using Chatter in-house, and just in general, the people who are using the stream, Facebook, Twitter, etc., is that it really starts to flatten the corporate internal hierarchy in somewhat of a similar way to what happens out there in the so-called consumer space. Victoria, your cover story talks a lot about the culture of Salesforce. Do you see that connection there?
Certainly. I mean, that was an interesting insight for me, that when you let everyone in an organization have a voice on a single platform, the hierarchies matter much less, and it matters more what you're contributing, and that seemed to be coming through in Salesforce's usage of Chatter so far. I mean, I think Salesforce culturally was probably like that to begin with. I mean, I've talked to many Salesforce employees over the years, and it also ties to Mark, where Mark puts his email address out there for anyone to see, and he actually checks his email. So, I talked to one sales guy who said, you're sort of paranoid that if you have a bad interaction with a customer, it's going to end up in Mark's inbox and he'll actually read it. That's pretty powerful. Now, not every CEO is going to do that. Not every CEO has the bandwidth that Mark somehow has to check all those emails. But I think Chatter, it just somehow seems to level that playing field and it makes communication more transparent. It also poses a lot of interesting questions, though. I mean, to a couple managers I spoke with, this is sort of terrifying. The idea that everyone in the organization has an equal voice. Well, what if there's some rogue employee? What do we do then? There are a lot of fascinating human implications here that we have to figure out.
John, how do we deal with the complexity of everybody having a voice or an equal voice?
Well, Salesforce, as Victoria had said, Salesforce is a little different from most companies in that we, as a culture, did not have a completely top-down mentality as far as the organizational hierarchy. But what Chatter does is gives everyone a voice. and the voice is raised, and it's the voice is spread out, and it's not just the voice of a person commenting. It is the documents. It is the other things that are speaking, which brings it more.
As JP points out, it's the documents chattering.
The documents chattering. The documents are tied back into the voice itself, and we are so much more productive now that we've eliminated a lot of email. For example, we're so much more productive now that we're eliminating a lot of the documents.
Couldn't come too soon.
Exactly, and we have there are dramatic changes that will happen in the company, and it's a rise of the individual contributor. It's a flattening of the organization. There's not going to be in some meetings, even at Salesforce, there would be one person talking, other people with their arms crossed. That's not happening anymore. It's not completely gone, but it's disappearing very rapidly.
Phil, do you think this has legs? Do you think this stream culture is going to continue to permeate the enterprise?
Well, I think there's a difficulty because I think it does depend on the organization. And although Salesforce, obviously, people are going to be encouraged to use Chatter because it's it's the company's product. So you've got this great permission to go ahead and actually work it and make it work. Whereas in a lot of organizations, you're talking about people are not encouraged to communicate, they're not encouraged to be open, there are all kinds of political reasons why an open information stream is going to be difficult for people to use or understand how to be productive with it. It could even be disruptive in some instances. So I think part of the task for the industry and for Salesforce and for its partners is to go out there and help businesses change themselves so that they can adapt to the opportunity and the potential of these new ways of communicating.
So we've seen some interesting marketing going on outside the building, segways with people riding up and down, trying to save us, or Microsoft's trying to save us from being forced, pardon the expression. And it seems that, where there's smoke, there's probably fire. I think they're a little worried about this. I've been predicting since, I think before JP was born, the death of Office. Does anybody here think that Office is in trouble?
Office is, obviously there's an element of Office being installed on desktops. And, but the last couple announcements of Microsoft Office, did it spur any, aspirational thoughts? Did it do anything? Did they have a conference like this where everyone's, pretty excited about it? Are they chattering about it? I don't think so. So in that way, Office is going away, and the activity stream is coming up.
Go ahead, JP.
I think that what we have to remember is it isn't almost about Office as much about the philosophy that Office engendered, okay? If you unpack it a bit and say, look at what we've learned about PowerPoint, right? That people have been thinking in sound bites and that significant strategic errors can be made because you are assuming the knowledge beyond the bullet point, and that knowledge quite often in large organizations doesn't exist. But it has been papered over because of the PAP, the comfort blanket, the security blanket of PowerPoint. If you switch from that to mail and say mail has been used to create asymmetric information inside the enterprise, this is insane, right? But it has been allowed to foment and become a fine art, where, CC really stands for ass cover. And to have something like blind copy in something you dare to call a collaboration tool is anathema. It's nonsense. You then look at the worst of it, right? Schedule. Most companies' strategies, as far as I can make out, are prioritized by Microsoft Outlook and Exchange. Not by the importance of what you're doing, but where two systems have figured out you have free space, right? Since around the same time as you were preaching the exit of Office, I was trying to figure out, we spent so long saying, keep fixed costs low and manage your variable costs according to market demand is a smart thing to do. And then we spend the rest of our forever filling our diaries up so that we have no free time. Well, our time in a working enterprise of knowledge workers is the most expensive resource we have, and we committed to April. Okay? There is something screwy in that picture.
You know, Victoria was not here yesterday. You were scheduled to be here, I think, but instead you watched the virtual conference unfold.
I did, yeah.
And we were sitting in the hall, and the ability of these devices to allow this kind of flow basically over Twitter and Facebook in synchronous, there's just this strange feeling of participating in some sort of a new language.
I was watching it from home, and it was almost, I hate to say it, but almost better than being here, because you're here, you can't see what 50 people are thinking at once. And watching it at home, that's what I was seeing. I was seeing the Twitter and the Facebook feeds simultaneous with Mark being on stage and other speakers, and it was fascinating insight into what people were actually thinking at the time.
So how do you think that's going to change the media?
Dramatically. I mean, we've been talking about it for a while, and so it almost sounds trite, but these buzzwords like being part of the conversation. But it's actually happening now, where the conversation is happening. It is this thing that is happening that we can watch, and companies have to pay attention to that. And I mean, Mark, to his credit, is one of the CEOs who does. I mean, he gets on Twitter and sees what people are saying about him, sees what they're saying about Salesforce. So it was fast. I'd never done that before. And to Salesforce's credit, you guys had the Twitter feeds and the Facebook feeds right alongside the keynote for everyone to see. So it was a remarkable level of transparency.
So do you see, what JP's talking about in terms of the, we're moving out of an era of sort of static documents and into, what do you call that, John? Is sort of the moving from documents to what?
To the activity stream, to the...
Okay, but, I mean, there's so many people who, when Twitter first started, people said, what is this? It's a toy. Then it became a time sink. And,
the people started following Oprah in order to get information about her updates. And then it was an entertainment vehicle. Then it was a brand identification vehicle. And people, a lot of them missed the boat on what it actually was truly a communications and collaboration vehicle where you can get insight into what's happening in real time. And I think, Victoria, you experienced that. If you were following your own, at mentions and in Twitter while you were watching the live event, I think you probably picked that up.
Yeah. These things do take time, and I know, Steve, yesterday you were talking about how chatter is the end of email, and I think that's going to take a very long time to happen. I mean, as much as we can't stand we're addicted to it.
You need him.
When Exchange server goes down, it happens instantaneously. It's happened a couple times at Salesforce where Exchange has gone down, and just people move over to groups inside Chatter. I mean, it's a great... I hope that it continues to fail, because it drives us right into...
There's a likely chance that will happen.
Yeah, I'm sort of betting on it.
It's not that email is going to die, but email is going to deliver what it was designed to deliver, which is it's a decent alert mechanism and transport, but it's not good for collaboration. It's not good for real threaded conversations. It's still not good enough for free text search to give me context, and for certain, it's not good as the mechanism by which I use multiple versions of documents and move them around. So, I don't see Chatter as the killer of email per se. I see Chatter as the killer of misuse of email for doing things it was not designed to do in the first place.
What percentage are misused, do you think, now?
Well, I have told people since I've joined Salesforce, I don't want mail. And
so all of
that means that inside Salesforce, the bulk of my mail is actually chatter digests, okay? Because it's a good way for me to receive them. But I still don't have today the ability to interact with people outside Salesforce within the same chatter domain.
Yeah.
So I do get mail. But I also get comments on my blog, direct messages on Twitter, Facebook messages. So it's not as if I'm just exchanging one for the other. I will always have multiple modalities of conversation. But if that conversation is going to lead to a valuable outcome, then persistence, threading, the ability to look at a common digital object when we're having the discussion, the capacity for people not to have to be in a sequential loop about it. There are many things where the publish-subscribe mindset is much more powerful than the broadcast mindset that underlies mail.
I think there's a problem also with the inbox being the focus of work, because the inbox doesn't have these capabilities for collaboration.
Imagine that if someone at home thought that work meant standing behind the door and watching the slot in the door that the mail came in on. Okay?
Right.
Because that is really what we're doing when we have an inbox as our focal attention. Right? We're cutting out the fact that there is life beyond the mailbox. The mailbox is just a collection of alerts. Right? It is not the UI for our lives.
Yeah.
Right. So I mean, basically, these transports are being, it's like RSS. These things are moving into the sort of stack as part of transports that work with different aspects of a communication model.
Yeah. You've got these signals, haven't you, that you need. Lots of different signals, information streams are coming to you, and you need some way of being able to have them where you can use them. And the inbox is a broken repository for those signals. It would be much better if the email could actually come to some other place rather than the inbox. If it actually came to where you're doing the work, would be helpful.
I agree with that. I think there's going to be a lot of. When we first started using Twitter, and especially with Facebook, the tendency to where you pull the trigger first on trying to contact somebody, I found it's much more efficient if you have a Twitter relationship where you both are following each other, which that opens up the direct message channel. It's easiest because people have learned how to follow that stream and put email slightly back as being something that they have to tend to, but it's a more immediate thing. And of course IM has both the opportunity and the problem of being too verbose, and it also tells the person who's trying to communicate with you that you're actually there, which Twitter and Chatter and these types of messaging systems allow you to gracefully fail from having a conversation. So I think that things are coming together.
It goes a bit beyond that. If you take Phil's point about the inbox as a broken metaphor for dealing with incoming mail, what you have to realize is now we have tools of voting something up the stack, right? The equivalent of dig or whatever else you want to call it. You have tools or like or any other expression of increasing priority within a fire hose because it's your social network is pushing it up the stack.
Right, and the whole mention.
Correct, but you have two other ways, right? You also have the retweet model, okay, which is also increasing the signal or the volume associated with something.
The amplification.
Yeah. Sorry?
Yeah, the amplification.
And then you have the third piece, which is actually the ability to use semantic understanding by saying that we will get better at whatever passes for, to expect everybody to be using hashtags, right, is really unreasonable on the common man.
Well, I'm not a big fan, but I recognize that hashtags have developed a sort of architecture. And I think that what you talk about with retweets is, I think it's a powerful signal, but I think that the @mentions, the reason that this technology exists is because people really want to find out whether anybody's talking about them or not. And we all sort of share this.
I can actually imagine a world where when somebody sends me an important mail, it comes into my next generation mailbox repeated every 2 minutes, okay? Because I don't have the time to search through history in the new world. I'm looking at flow. And one of the ways to get attention is for the mail to be retweeted, okay? But when the person does that, he takes the risk that I may block him, okay? Because the block is the way of saying that was an unreasonable use of the constant remailing. But people ring you all the time, people knock on your door all the time, people will do repeated things to grab your attention. Because at the end of the day, this prioritizing is about attention. You know, somebody else's right to try and say, this is important, please do something about it, right? It's not random. So we're going to give people tools to grab attention.
So we're almost out of time here. So I just want to go around the horn. Just a comment from Phil. Do you think that this is a viable reworking of the infrastructure, the sort of thing that we look at when the center of our desktop? Is that where this is going?
Well, you know, I think that there's still a long way to go. I think we're just at the first step. That we've got to tie things like chatter much more tightly into the execution applications, for example. And I think that we've also got to look at how do we tie the social streams between the different application stovepipes in the enterprise and between the different enterprise stovepipes across enterprise boundaries. And many of the questions as to how that's going to be done have not even been posed yet. They're certainly not being answered.
John?
I think the broken mailbox metaphor is completely appropriate. It's very hard to work inside a mailbox. And but it's where it comes really clearly broken is when you're looking at your mobile device and it does not mimic what's on your desktop, you know, your Outlook. And no matter how many bolt-ons or plugins that they can put on Outlook, they're not going to make it into that mobile device where you have an engagement model that can only happen with something that's a truly collaborative tool.
Victoria?
You know, this morning I was chatting with someone and she said, yeah, I spent all day yesterday going through my emails because I hadn't done that in a while and it felt so unproductive. And I kind of go, yeah, we all do that. We all have these days where we're in our email inboxes and it doesn't feel productive. So that's an issue, and that's also an opportunity for something like Chatter. You know, I think there are a lot of issues that have to be figured out, especially for big companies that aren't going to be comfortable with the idea of the flat hierarchy. I mean, they're going to want different levels of access, and I know some of that is in groups within Chatter that you can do. But I think we'll see some boundaries that will naturally have to come up just for large organizations to get comfortable with the idea. But yeah, I think this is a shift. I think it's the beginning of a shift in how we communicate digitally in the enterprise.
Do you think this is going to ride on the back of this mobile wave? Are they
mobile accelerates it.
Yeah,
I mean, mobile accelerates it because, you know, if the conversation is happening in Chatter, it has to be mobile at the same time because we're all, I mean, we all have BlackBerries in our back pockets,
well,
at least.
Except for Mark, who's got an iPad.
Right.
In his back pocket.
Yes.
All right. I think that we've, I don't know if we yet expressed specifically our excitement about what's going on here. I find this just to be, I haven't been this excited about technology since, you know, the early days of the web.
Can I just add one thing?
You've got 30 seconds.
What was the live streaming within the consumer has not really been understood in the enterprise. So we're very early when we use something like Chatter, but the value we're going to see emanate is when what Clay Spinuzzi in Austin called ambient signaling. We learn how to create value because everything is chattering. That it's the ambient signals that are going to teach us about what we don't know. And like live streaming has taught us something at the Twitter level for the consumer, Chatter is going to teach us something about ambient signals in the workplace, and that is an incredible sort of pioneering space which I'm seeing opening up now.
Well, JP gets the last word, not surprisingly. I want to thank JP and Phil Wainewright and my colleague John Taschek. And Victoria, thanks so much for being here in person.
Thank you.
I hope you're enjoying this as much as you do virtually. This is Steve Gillmor. This has been a special edition of the Gillmor Gang. We'll see you again next time. Bye-bye.